balcony rooms. My mother-in-law added, she's used to less. I just smiled and said, noted. When the cruise director walked over, I stood up and simply said 3 words. My name is Marla Ostrander. I'm 37, and I'm the travel agent who built that sailing. 9 staterooms, $899 a person for a balcony that was selling to the public that same week for $1,649. I put the deposit down 14 months before anybody packed a bag. $4,050, 9 cabins at $450 apiece, on the agency card with my signature on the authorization line. Group number G44711109. Meridian Star Cruises, the Coral Meridian, 7 nights out of Port Canaveral. Every name on that rooming list was there because I typed it, including my daughters. Junie Ostrander, age 9, stateroom 8618, deck 8, aft. Sofa bed by the balcony door, because that's the bed she picked out 14 months ago with a green marker. She wasn't in 8618 when we boarded. Let me back up, because if I start with the dinner, you'll think I lost my temper, and I didn't. I have never once won an argument with the Ostranders. Not one, in 11 years. So by that Tuesday night on deck 4, I had stopped arguing with people entirely. I was only arguing with paper. I need to tell you about the kitchen first. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. I was only arguing with paper. I need to tell you about the kitchen first. 14 months before we sailed, on a Sunday in September, Vivian Ostrander called a family meeting at her house on Cascade Street in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's my mother-in-law, 68 years old, still does her own hair, still keeps a laminated seating chart for Thanksgiving in the drawer under the phone. She'd been talking about a big trip since her 70th was on the horizon. The whole family, all the grandkids, 1 boat, 1 week, 1 photograph at the end of it where nobody is missing. There were 11 of us in that kitchen. Dale, my father-in-law, in the chair by the back door where he always sits, not saying much. Chet, the oldest son, regional manager at a boat dealership out on Route 20, which he mentions the way other people mention the weather. His wife Bristol, 41, who runs the family group chat and thinks that's the same thing as running the family. Their 2, Tatum, 17 at the time of sailing, and Colton, 13. Denise, the middle one, with her husband Grady and their kids, Paxton and Wren. And then us, Reed and me, and Junie. Reed is the youngest. He's 40. He services commercial HVAC units for a company that does the hospitals and the 2 big grocery chains. And he has been the punchline of that family since before I met him. Not cruelly. That's the part outsiders never understand. Nobody in that kitchen has ever called my husband a failure. They just say things like, Reed's fine with simple, and Reed never needed much, in a warm voice at holidays, while they hand him the folding chair. Vivian looked around the table that afternoon and said, I want everybody there, but I'm not paying $11,000 for a week. And Chet said, that's what Marla's for. I remember I was standing at the counter, not sitting, because there weren't enough chairs. And I remember that I liked hearing it. That's the thing I'd take back if I could take anything back. I liked being the one they needed, because here is what I actually do. When I'm not the woman standing at the counter. I've been at Halyard Travel on Peach Street for 11 years. Dot Farkas owns it. She's 62, and she trained me from the front desk up. I hold my accreditation card. I'm the agent of record on about 90 active bookings at any given time. And my specialty is groups. Not honeymoons, not spring break. Groups. Church choirs, dental conventions, a mahjong club from Ashtabula that has sailed with me 9 times. A group booking is not the same animal as a family all buying tickets on the same day. When you block a group, you sign a group sales agreement with the cruise line, and you hold the cabins before the public ever sees the price. You lock the rate, you earn amenity dollars against the block. At 8 paid staterooms, you earn a tour conductor credit, which is the industry's way of saying the person who filled the boat rides for free. And you, the agent of record, one name, one card, one signature, you own the rooming list. That last part is going to matter, so I'll say it plain. The rooming list is the document that decides which human being sleeps in which room. It's a spreadsheet with cabin numbers down the left and names across, and the cruise line will not accept it from anybody but the agent of record. Every version gets a revision number and a timestamp. Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3. It is the least romantic document in the travel industry, and it is the only thing on this earth that has ever taken my side. So that Sunday in the kitchen, I did the math out loud. I told them if I blocked it 14 months out, before the fall promotion cycle, I could hold ocean view cabins at $8.99 a person and probably use the amenity credit to push the whole block up to balcony. 9 cabins. Every family unit gets a door that locks. Every kid gets a bed. Bristol said, $900 for a balcony? Like I'd said, I could make it snow. Vivian didn't say anything at first. She came around the counter and she took something off her own cardigan and pinned it to my collar. It was a little brass anchor, maybe the size of a thumbnail, with a green stone in it that isn't a real stone. It had belonged to her mother, who worked the ticket window at a ferry landing in Ashtabula for 22 years. Vivian had worn it on every trip I'd ever booked her. "You're the one who gets us where we're going," she said. I want to be honest about that moment, because if I skip it, none of the rest of this makes any sense. I was 36 years old, and my mother-in-law pinned her mother's anchor on me in front of her whole family, and I went out to the car afterward and sat there for a minute before I could drive. Reed asked if I was okay. I said the sun was in my eyes. It was September in Erie. There was no sun. 11 years of standing at the counter, and I thought that pin meant I'd finally gotten a chair. The block went in on a Monday. I remember because Dot brought in a box of those hard cinnamon candies she keeps for closings and put 3 on my desk when the confirmation came back. 9 staterooms held, deck 8, aft, cabins 8618 through 8632, most of them adjoining. Group G 4471109, deposit due in 10 days. Nobody had 10 days worth of money. That's not a complaint. It's just a fact about my husband's family. Chet had a boat payment. Denise's furnace had just gone. Vivian said she'd write me a check once the CDs come due, which is a sentence I have heard from that woman for 11 years about 11 different things. So I put $4,050 on the halyard card, and I signed the authorization myself, and Dot looked at me over her glasses and said one thing. "Get it in writing, who's paying you back." I didn't. I want that on the record too, since we're doing records. I did not get it in writing because getting it in writing would have meant admitting out loud that I didn't trust them. And that Sunday, I had a brass anchor on my collar. They paid me back in pieces over 11 months. Denise, all of it, in cash, in an envelope the first week. Chet, 400 of his 450, and then a story about the dealership's quarter. Vivian, nothing, ever. And when I brought it up at Easter, she laughed and said, "Marla, you get all those free trips." I don't get free trips. I get a tour conductor credit that I had already assigned to her. Now, the part with the green marker. That Sunday, while the adults were arguing about whether Tatum was old enough to have her own key card, Junie was under the table with the deck plan I'd printed for the meeting. She was 8. She'd never been on a boat bigger than the Bemis Point ferry. When I found her, she'd colored the whole thing. Deck 8 in green, the pool deck in blue. And she'd written a name in every single stateroom in that block. Not just ours, all 9. Grandma and Grandpa in 8620. Tatum and Wren in 8624. She'd spelled Colton with a K. And in 8618, in the little rectangle by the balcony door where the sofa bed goes, she'd drawn a stick figure with brown hair and written Junie window side. She folded it into eighths and asked me to keep it in my work bag so it wouldn't get lost. That's where it stayed. 14 months, in the zip pocket of my tote, going to work with me every day. Getting soft at the creases. She asked about that boat probably twice a week for a year. Not for the pool, not for the ice cream. She'd ask what time we'd get to the room. She wanted to know if she could open the balcony door by herself. She's a quiet kid. She's the youngest of the 5 cousins by a year and a half, and she's the only one who doesn't have a bedroom she didn't have to share. She's the one who says, "That's okay," before anybody asks her to be okay with anything. She learned that in that family. I watched her learn it. I submitted Rev 4 of the rooming list in June, 5 months out. 23 passengers, 9 staterooms, every name spelled right, every birth date checked against a passport. Yvette Salas at the Meridian Star Group desk sent back the confirmation with a smiley face in the signature line, because Yvette and I have been doing this together for 6 years. Rev 4 had my daughter in 8618 with her parents. I printed it. I put a copy in the file at work, and I put a copy in the accordion folder in the hall closet at home. Because that's how I was raised, and that's how Dot trained me. And because a group file is never really closed until the ship comes back. 9 days before we sailed, on a Wednesday, at 4:52 in the afternoon, an automated email came in from the Meridian Star Group portal. Subject line, rooming list updated. G-4471109, Reva 7. I was standing at the copier. I remember the exact time because Dot had already turned the front sign around, and I was thinking about whether the fish place on Buffalo Road stopped serving at 9. Reva 7. I had submitted Rev 4. I opened it on my phone right there next to the copier, and I scrolled down past 8620 and 8622 and 8624, and I found stateroom 2054. Deck 2. Forward. Interior, no window. 3 names in it. Tatum Ostrander, 17. Sutton Vale, 16. And Junie Ostrander, 9. Third berth. Rollaway. 6 decks and the whole length of the ship away from her mother. I stood at that copier for a long time, not crying. I want to be clear about that, because in my family, crying is a thing people do to win, and I've never been any good at it. I stood there with my phone in my hand and the machine still humming behind me, and I read Rev 7 4 times, top to bottom, the way you read a lab result. Then I locked the office, drove home, and made spaghetti. Junie set the table. She asked how many days, and I said 9. And she said 9, like it was a good number. I didn't tell her. That's the first thing I'd want somebody to understand. For 9 days, I got up, packed lunches, and did not tell my 9-year-old that her cabin was gone, because I was still telling myself I could fix it before she ever had to know. Thursday morning, I called Yvette Salas at the Meridian Star Group desk at 8:02, 2 minutes after they opened. Yvette and I have never met in person. 6 years of phone calls, 40-some sailings. She has a laugh like a car alarm, and she pronounces my name Marla, both syllables, like it's important. "Okay," she said. "Don't talk yet. Let me pull the log." I listened to her type for 90 seconds. Tuesday, 10:14 in the morning, inbound call to the general group line, not to me, I was in a training. Rep was Colby, he's new. Caller identified as Bristol Ostrander. She gave the group number, the sailing date, and the lead passenger's date of birth. That's Vivian's birthday. Whatever it was, it verified. Colby took her as an authorized family contact. Yvette went quiet for a second. "Marla, he shouldn't have. The agreement says rooming list changes come from the agent of record in writing. But he took it, and once it's keyed, it's keyed." What did she ask for? 2 ads, Kimmer Vale and Dean Vale, and a consolidation. That's the word the cruise industry uses when it moves people. Consolidation. Here's what Bristol did, laid out flat. Her sister, Kimmer, and Kimmer's husband decided 9.5 days before sailing that they wanted to come. My block was full, 9 cabins, 23 people, every berth spoken for. So Meridian Star opened an interior cabin for the new guests. Deck 2, forward, no window. Stateroom 2054. Bristol did not put her sister in it. She put Kimmer and Dean in balcony 8624, and she moved my daughter down to deck 2. That's the whole thing. There was an interior cabin. 2 grown adults were added at the last minute, out of nowhere. And the person who got sent 6 decks down to a rollaway bed was the 9-year-old who'd been on the list for 14 months. I asked Yvette to read me the note field. She said, Consolidate Minors 2054. Third berth rollaway. Guest 9, guardian in cabin. Guardian in cabin. I want you to hold on to those 3 words because they come back. Fix it, I said. And Yvette said the thing that made this a story instead of a phone call. I can't. We're inside 10 days. The file locked Monday night. Everything transfers to the ship's inventory system and shoreside at its stop. She let out a breath. I can reverse it 2 ways. Written consent from the party who requested the change, or a manifest correction on board by the ship. So I need Bristol to sign something. Or you need the ship. A pause. Marla, bring your file. All of it. Ask for the hotel director's office, not the guest services counter. The desk staff can't touch a group manifest. Another pause, and I could hear her deciding whether to say it. And don't argue with your family about this. Argue at the desk. The desk has to look at paper. Your family doesn't. I called Bristol at 11:40 that morning from the parking lot behind the office. She picked up on the 5th ring, in the car, with the radio on. I saw Rev 7, I said. Rev what? You called the group line and moved Junie to deck 2. There was maybe 2 seconds where I think she considered denying it. Then she went the other direction entirely, which is what she always does, because Bristol's talent is making you feel unreasonable for noticing. Marla, it's a cot. She's 9. She's going to be in the pool from 8 in the morning until they drag her out. She's not going to be sitting in the room admiring the drapes. There was an interior cabin available. You put your sister in a balcony and my kid in the interior. Kimmer's never been on a ship in her life. Junie's never been on a ship in her life. Junie's a child, she said. Kimmer's 44. I have replayed that sentence more times than I'd like to admit. It's so clean. It's the whole family in 11 words. Adults get windows. Children get whatever's left. And the children who get whatever's left are always the same children. You didn't have the authority to change that list, I said. Oh, come on. It's a family trip, not a business. It's a group contract with my accreditation number on it, she laughed. Not mean. That's the part. It was the laugh you give a kid who's using a grown-up word wrong. You were CC'd, she said. I wasn't. There is no CC. The portal sends an automated notice to the agent of record after a change is already keyed, which is how I found out at 4:52 on a Wednesday standing at a copier. I called Vivian that night. She was watching her program, and she turned it down instead of off, which in that house is a level of attention. I explained it twice. Deck 2? No window? 6 decks from us? And all the way forward? 3 girls in a cabin, and my 9-year-old on a rollaway between 2 teenagers who did not ask for a roommate. Vivian said, well, Junie's easy. She's easy because she's never once been given a reason not to be. Marla. That voice. Patient, warm, and closed. Kimmer and Dean are on a different budget than the rest of us, and Bristol's just trying to make it work for everybody. Junie doesn't need much. She's never needed much. I said, she picked her bed 14 months ago, and my mother-in-law said, then she'll pick another one. Chet called Friday. Not me, Reed. I only heard my husband's side of it, standing in the kitchen with the water running, so it'd look like I wasn't listening. Reed said okay about 9 times, and then he said, don't talk about my wife like that. And then he hung up and put his phone face down on the counter and went outside to the truck. He sat out there 20 minutes. When he came back in, he told me what Chet had said, because Reed has never in his life been able to keep something from me for more than half an hour. Chet said, you've been riding your wife's job for years, so don't get sensitive when the job's the only reason you're on the boat. Reed didn't hit anybody. He's not that. But he stood in our kitchen at 40 years old with his ears red and said, They've been doing that to me since I was 9. And I said, I know, it stops with Junie. I didn't know yet what that was going to mean. It just came out of me. Denise texted me Saturday morning, 3 lines, and then nothing for a week. I told her not to. She said it was easier than asking Kimmer to take the inside room. I'm sorry, Marla. Easier. That's the word I kept. Saturday, I drove to the office on my day off and let myself in with the alarm code, and Dot Farkas was already there, because Dot is always already there. 62 years old, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a mug that says, World's Okayest Boss that a client gave her in 2011. I put the whole thing in front of her. Rev 4, Rev 7. The changelog Yvette had emailed me. Dot read it the way she reads everything, with one finger moving down the page. Then she said 2 things that ran my next 9 days. The first was, don't argue with them, argue with the record. People can talk their way out of a conversation. Nobody talks their way out of a timestamp. The second one, she said slower. And do not touch that rooming list yourself. I said I could resubmit Rev 4 in 4 minutes. And then you're the agent who altered a manifest 8 days out without written authorization on a booking where you're also a passenger and the party in dispute. She took her glasses off. Marla, your number is on that contract, not Bristol's. If anything happens in that cabin on deck 2, a kid gets hurt, a kid gets sick, anything. The line pulls the manifest, and the name on the agent line is yours. You didn't put your daughter in there, but right now, on paper, it looks like you did. That's when the floor moved a little. It wasn't a cot anymore. It was my card. 11 years of building a book of business and a phone call I wasn't on had hung my accreditation number on a stateroom assignment I would never have made. I asked her if I should cancel the whole thing. She let me sit with that one myself, which is how she teaches. 9 days out, a group cancellation is 100% penalty. My $4,050, gone. 23 fares, gone. Denise, who paid me in cash in an envelope the first week and has never once asked me for a favor, gone. Dale, who's 71 and has emphysema and has been telling people at the VFW for a year that he's taking his wife on a boat. Ren, who's 10. Junie, who has asked me twice a week for 14 months what time we get to the room. I could burn it all down and be right, and then I'd be a woman who ruined her mother-in-law's 70th birthday over a bed. That is exactly what they would have called it, forever, at every holiday for the rest of my life. So I decided to go. Sunday, I sat at the dining room table after Junie went up, and I built the file. Rev 4, printed, with Yvette's confirmation email stapled behind it, timestamped June 11th. Rev 7, printed, with the changelog line, Tuesday, 10:14 a.m., inbound. Authorized family contact, B. Ostrander. The group sales agreement, page 3, section 9, highlighted in yellow, rooming list additions, deletions, and reassignments shall be submitted in writing by the agent of record. The deposit receipt, $4,050, Halyard Travel, 14 months earlier. The amenity statement, which showed something I hadn't looked at closely until that night. The deposit on stateroom 2054 had been drawn against the group's onboard credit pool. That credit exists because I filled 8 cabins. My daughter's cot was paid for with the credit I earned. And then last, I pulled up Meridian Star's published stateroom occupancy policy because I have read it 300 times, and I wanted the printed page in my hand. Guests under 18 years of age must be assigned to a stateroom occupied by a guest 21 years of age or older, or to a directly connecting stateroom. Stateroom 2054 had 3 people in it. Tatum, 17. Sutton, 16. Junie, 9. There is no 21-year-old on deck 2. There is no connecting stateroom. 2054 is a single interior box forward of the crew stairwell, 6 decks and 400 feet from where I would be sleeping. That manifest could not legally sail. So I went back to Rev 7 and read the guest line for stateroom 2054 one more time, slowly, the way Dot taught me, one finger moving down the page. Tatum Ostrander. Date of birth listed March 4th, 2005. Tatum was born in 2008. I know that because I have bought that girl a birthday present every March for 11 years. One digit. Somebody typed a 5 where an 8 goes, and the system looked at that cabin and saw a 21-year-old adult supervising 2 minors, and it let the whole thing through. I don't know if Bristol did that on purpose. I've never said she did. I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend I do. What I knew at 11:40 on a Sunday night at my dining room table was that the ship's own manifest said something that was not true, and that in 6 days I would be standing on that ship with the only file in the world that could prove it. I put everything in a green accordion folder. I put the folder in my work tote, in the big pocket. In the zip pocket, where it had been for 14 months, was a square of paper folded into eighths, soft at the creases, colored in green marker. Junie was in the doorway in her pajamas. She wasn't supposed to be up. "Mom," she said, "what time do we get to the room?" And I said, "Early, baby. We get there early." We drove. 2 days. Erie to Port Canaveral in Reed's work truck with the toolbox still bolted in the bed, because $1,100 in airfare for 3 people was $1,100 we didn't have after I'd floated the deposit. Chet flew. Kimmer and Dean flew 9 days out at whatever the walk-up fare was, which is a detail I'd like everyone to sit with for a second. We stayed at a motel outside Savannah with a pool the size of a parking space, and Junie swam in it for 40 minutes in the dark and called it practice. Sunday morning, Port Canaveral, 10:40 a.m. The terminal is a big glass hangar with a floor that squeaks and a smell like sunscreen and floor wax. You can see the ship through the windows before you're inside it. 15 decks of white, filling the whole frame, with the funnel painted with that navy star. Junie stopped walking when she saw it. Just stopped, in the middle of a moving crowd, with her backpack on both shoulders. "That's the whole thing?" she said. "Check-in is a kiosk now, but the key cards still come from a person. Ours came from a woman named Yolanda with reading glasses pushed up in her hair. She scanned 3 passports, printed 3 cards, and slid them across in a little cardboard folder with the deck plan printed inside. Reed Ostrander, 8618. Marla Ostrander, 8618. Junie Ostrander, 2054. Junie is 9. She reads everything. She read her own card before I could get my hand on it. 2054, she said. Then she looked at the deck plan printed in the folder, and she found deck 2, and she found where deck 2 was in relation to deck 8, and I watched her face do the arithmetic. "Is that a different floor?" I said. "Today you're with me. Come on." That's all I said, and she took my hand, which she doesn't do much anymore, and we walked up the gangway with her hand in mine and the folder under my arm. I tried at the terminal. I want that in the record, too, because later they all said I could have handled it quietly. And I did try to handle it quietly. There's a port agent's podium before security. I asked the man at it, a big guy in a Meridian Star polo with a lanyard down to his belt, how I could correct a group manifest assignment. I said I was the agent of record. I said I had the file. He was kind about it. He said the manifest closes at the port, and the ship owns it from the moment the gangway opens. Guest services after 4, he said. They'll walk it up. So I had a plan. 4 o'clock, guest services, folder, done, and Junie would never have to know there'd been a problem at all. Deck 8, aft, is a long, quiet hallway with a carpet pattern like waves. 8618 is the 4th door from the end. The room smelled like fresh linen and lemon cleaner. 2 twin beds pushed together into a queen. Balcony door. The handle Junie had wanted to work herself. The sofa was a sofa, not a bed. Nobody had made it up because the ship's system said there were 2 guests in that room, and a stateroom attendant makes up exactly what the system says. Junie stood in the middle of the floor with her backpack still on and looked at the sofa for about 3 seconds. And then she said, "It's okay." She's 9, and she said it's okay before anybody asked her to be okay. We went down to deck 2. The elevator only takes you so far forward. After that, it's a stairwell and a corridor, and the corridor changes. The carpet's flatter, the ceiling's lower, there's a hum you can feel in your teeth, which is the bow thruster housing, and a set of double doors at the end marked crew only with a keypad on it. 2054 is the last passenger door before the crew doors. Interior, no window, 2 twin beds, a desk, a bathroom the size of a phone booth. Both beds already had suitcases on them, open, spilling. Tatum had a speaker going. Sutton Vale was sitting on the desk chair, doing something to her eyelashes in the mirror. There was no third bed. The rollaway hadn't come up yet. Tatum saw Junie first and did the thing that told me she'd known and hadn't liked it either. She sat up fast and moved her suitcase 6 inches. Like 6 inches was going to fix anything. "Hey, Junie Bug," she said. And then, to me, not quite looking at me, "Mom said it was fine." I said, "I know she did. That's a 17-year-old. I'm not going to make her the villain of this." She got told where to sleep too. The stateroom attendant came around the corner while I was standing there. His name tag said Wayan, and under it, Indonesia. He had a tablet in a rubber case and a towel over his shoulder. He said, "Mrs. Ostrander, the rollaway is coming at 1 o'clock. Then he looked at his tablet, and then he looked at me, and then he looked at Junie, and his face did something careful. "You are staying in this cabin?" "No," I said. "I'm in 8618. He looked at the tablet again. He turned it a little, not toward me, just enough that he could read it twice. "It says guardian in cabin," he said. There it was. Out loud, from a man with a towel on his shoulder, 40 minutes into a 7-night cruise. I said, "There's no guardian in that cabin. There's a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, and my 9-year-old. Wayan didn't argue, and he didn't panic. He is very obviously a man who has been doing this a long time. He tapped the tablet twice and said, "I make a note." And I said, "And this is the only thing I did that whole afternoon that I'd call strategy. Would you please put the time on it?" He did. He read it out to me while he typed. The way you read a number back to somebody on the phone. 12:52. I have thought about Wayan Suarta a lot since. He made $11 an hour plus tips. He had 4 more cabins to turn before muster. And he was the first person in that entire chain, a cruise line, a family, an agency, a manifest, who looked at a 9-year-old on a rollaway and said out loud that the paperwork didn't match the room. Muster at 3:30. Everybody in their life jacket zones, 23 Ostranders and Vales scattered across 3 assembly stations. Sail away at 4:30 with the horn you feel in your ribs and the whole port sliding backward. At 4:05, I got in line at guest services on deck 5 with the green folder under my arm. The line was 40 people long. It is always 40 people long at 4 o'clock on embarkation day. Broken safe, wrong bedding, somebody's luggage is in Fort Lauderdale. I got to the counter at 4:52, the same time on the clock as the email at the copier, which I noticed and didn't like. And I talked to a supervisor named Petra with a Croatian flag on her tag. I did it right. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say the word excluded. I didn't mention my sister-in-law. I said, "I'm the agent of record on group G4471109. There's a rooming list error. A minor is assigned to a stateroom with no guest 21 or over, and I have the documentation." Petra didn't blink at any of it. She said, "That is the hotel director's office. The desk cannot alter a group manifest." I said, "Can I go to the hotel director's office?" And she said the sentence that put me at that dinner table. Embarkation debrief. The office opens at 7. First seating is at 6. She wrote a reference slip and slid it under the glass. Handwritten, ballpoint, with a case number on it, G-4471109-B. She said, "Bring it at 7 and they'll have the file up." I put it in the folder. I went back to 8618. I put the folder in the closet on top of the safe. Then I got my daughter dressed for dinner. She had a dress. Navy, with white piping at the collar from the good rack at the outlet in Grove City, and my mother-in-law's word for that dress at the fitting 3 weeks earlier had been serviceable. Junie loved it. She'd been keeping it in the garment bag in the back of her closet since August, so it wouldn't get regular. I did her hair in the little bathroom mirror on deck 8 while the ship rolled just enough to make her giggle. She asked if she could sit next to Grandma. I said we'd see. The main dining room is on deck 4, 3 stories of it, with a staircase in the middle and a chandelier that looks like a school of fish. Table 212 is a 12-top under the second landing, and there was another 12 beside it. And my husband's family had already spread across both of them by the time we came down the stairs. Kimmer Vale was telling the whole side of the room about her balcony. That's what she called it, my balcony. She'd been on the ship for 6 hours, and she'd already had a picture taken of herself in the doorway of 8624 with a glass of something. Vivian sat at the head of the near table with her cardigan over the back of her chair and her mother's brass anchor pinned to the collar of it. She'd taken it back 3 weeks after she gave it to me. She'd asked for it for a funeral and never asked again, and I never asked either. Dale had his oxygen concentrator by his foot and a bread roll in each hand. Chet was ordering the second bottle before the first one came. Junie counted the chairs. There were exactly enough. That's a detail I don't think anybody who wasn't there will ever get right. They hadn't left her out of dinner. Dinner was fine. Dinner was warm. Denise waved. Colton showed Junie a magic trick with a napkin ring, and she laughed at it. That's how it works in a family like that. Nobody ever locks the door. They just move the bed. Bristol came in last, wearing white, and she sat down across from us, and she put her purse on the empty chair beside her. And about 4 minutes in, between the bread and the appetizers, in the middle of a normal noisy table, she reached into that purse and took out a small paper sleeve with a key card in it and slid it across the tablecloth. Not to me, to Junie. Past the water glass, right to my 9-year-old's place setting. The number 2054 was printed on the sleeve in blue ink. There wasn't a cabin left for your girl, she said. And my mother-in-law, without looking up from her menu, said, she's used to less. Junie put her hand flat on top of the sleeve and pulled it into her lap, and she said, thank you. She said, thank you. And then she looked up at me to see how she was supposed to feel, the way kids do, and I made sure my face didn't give her anything to be scared of. I smiled and I said, noted. That's all. One word. Bristol went back to her bread. Here's what I was actually doing behind that word. I was doing the same arithmetic I do at my desk 40 times a week. It was 6:14. The hotel director's office opened at 7. Between 6:14 and 7 o'clock, at some point, a 9-year-old was going to be handed a key card and sent forward on deck 2. Past the crew doors, into a cabin the ship's own manifest believed contained a 21-year-old adult. Not the wrong bed. The wrong record. And nobody on that ship knew it but me and a stateroom attendant named Wyan. That's when the cruise director came around the staircase. I knew who he was before he got to us because they put his face on the daily program. Rui Barros, Portuguese, mid-40s, the voice they hire those men for. He had a navy folder in his hand with a gold star embossed on it, and he was doing his first night rounds. And he stopped at the head of our 2 tables and asked, warm as anything, good evening, I'm looking for the organizer of Group 44-71109. Vivian put her menu down and started to rise. Because in that family, Vivian is the organizer of everything. But he was reading off a card clipped inside the folder, and what it said was not organizer. The agent of record, he said, Marla Ostrander. 23 people turned to look at the end of the table where I was sitting, next to a 9-year-old holding a key card to an interior cabin in her lap. I put my napkin on the table. I stood up, and I said, "Pull the manifest." Rui Barros looked at me the way you look at somebody who's answered a question you didn't ask. "I'm sorry?" I reached across Reed's plate and picked up my clutch. And out of it, I took the handwritten slip Petra had passed me under the glass at 4:52. "Your guest services desk gave me this an hour ago," I said. "Case G 4471109B. They told me the hotel director's office opens at 7. I held it out to him, and he took it, because when someone hands a ship's officer a case number, he takes it. "I don't have until 7. Chet said, "Marla, sit down." I didn't look at him. I have looked at Chet Ostrander for 11 years, and it has never once gotten me anything. I kept my voice at exactly the volume you'd use to ask for more bread, because I had already decided in the 4 seconds it took me to stand up that whatever else happened at that table, nobody was going to be able to say afterward that I screamed. "Stateroom 2054, I said. "Deck 2, forward. There are 3 guests berthed in it, 17, 16, and 9. There is no guest 21 or older in that cabin and no connecting stateroom." Rui Barros's eyebrows moved about a 1/4 inch. "That's all. Those men are trained." "That would not pass our occupancy standard," he said. "It passed," I said, "because your manifest is wrong." And then I said the part I'd been holding since Sunday night at my dining room table. Rev 7 of that rooming list gives Tatum Ostrander a date of birth of March 4th, 2005. That would make her 21. The system read a 21-year-old in that cabin and cleared it. I turned my head just slightly. "She's 4 chairs down from you." Everything at both tables stopped. Not dramatically. It's not a movie. What actually happens is that a dozen conversations end at slightly different times, over about 2 seconds. And then there's a hole in the noise, and you can hear the chandelier clinking, and somebody 2 tables over asking for hot sauce. Bristol said, "Oh my God, Marla." Vivian said my name once, low, the way you'd correct a dog at somebody else's house. Rui Barros turned around, very politely, and walked 4 chairs down. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "May I ask your date of birth?" Tatum was 17 years old, in a sundress, holding a bread plate with her whole family watching her. And she is a good kid. And she had been sitting there for 3 minutes, knowing exactly what was in that cabin because she'd been in it. She said, "March 4th, 2008. Her mother said, "Tatum." Tatum said, "What? That's my birthday." That was the moment. Right there, not when I stood up. Everything after it was paperwork. Rui touched his earpiece and stepped back from the table and said something short and quiet in it. And then he came back to me and said, "Ma'am, would you come with me, please? And your husband?" Reed was already standing. I hadn't noticed him stand. Denise stood up too. She came around the back of the chairs and she crouched down next to Junie and said, "Hey, do you want to go find where they keep the ice cream? I've been looking for it all day, and I'm no good at this ship." Junie looked at me. I nodded. She took my sister-in-law's hand and went. Denise looked up at me on her way past and said one thing, quiet, out of the side of her mouth. "I've got her. Go." Behind us, as we crossed the dining room, I heard Vivian say to the table, not quietly at all, "Well, she's embarrassed, this family." 23 people at 2 tables. My mother-in-law's opinion at volume was that the embarrassing thing was me saying it. There's a room behind guest services on deck 5 that guests don't usually see. Small, no window, a round table, 4 chairs, a screen on the wall, a box of tissues on the credenza that tells you what usually happens in there. Ingrid Halverson came in 90 seconds after we sat down. Guest services manager, deputy to the hotel director, Norwegian, maybe 50, silver hair cut short, 4 stripes, reading glasses she put on and took off about 9 times over the next hour. She was not warm and she was not cold. She was the single most useful human being I have ever dealt with in my professional life. Mrs. Ostrander, you are the accredited agent of record on this group? I am. May I see your card? I gave it to her. She wrote the number down by hand before she gave it back, which told me she'd done this before. Show me what you have. So I opened the green accordion folder on that table and I did the only thing I know how to do. I put down Rev 4, June 11th. Time-stamped 23 passengers, 9 staterooms submitted by me, with Yvette Salas's confirmation email stapled behind it. I put my finger on line 11. Stateroom 8618, Rita Ostrander, Marla Ostrander, Junie Ostrander, age 9. I put down Rev 7. The Tuesday 9 days out, 10:14 a.m., inbound call, and the note field. Consolidate minors, 2054, third berth rollaway, guest 9, guardian in cabin. I put down the change log Yvette had emailed me with the rep's initials and the authorization method. I put down page 3 of the group sales agreement with section 9 highlighted in yellow. Rooming list additions, deletions, and reassignments shall be submitted in writing by the agent of record. I put down the deposit receipt, $4,050, Halyard Travel, 14 months earlier. I put down the amenity statement showing the deposit for $2,054 drawn against the group's onboard credit pool. And I put down the printed page of Meridian Star's own published occupancy policy, which I had folded and unfolded so many times in 9 days that it had gone soft. Ingrid Halverson read all of it. It took her about 6 minutes and she did not say one word the entire time. And when she got to Rev 7, she stopped and read the guest line for 2054 twice. Then she turned to her screen, and she did the thing I did not expect and have never forgotten. She didn't look up my paperwork. She looked up the ship's own. At 12:52 today, she said, a stateroom attendant on deck 2 entered a service note on cabin 2054. She turned the screen halfway toward me. Rollaway requested, guardian not present in cabin. Reported by guest, Marla Ostrander, 8618 Wayan, 4 hours earlier, with a towel on his shoulder and 4 cabins left to turn. I want to say something about that because it's the part I think about at 2 in the morning. My folder proved what should have been. Wayan's 11-word service note proved what actually was, from inside the ship's own system, entered by a crew member with nothing to gain, 4 hours before I ever said a word in a dining room. I didn't win that night because I'm clever. I won because 2 different records said the same thing, and neither of them was Bristol's. Ingrid took her glasses off. Who is B. Ostrander? My husband's brother's wife. Is she on board? She's at table 212. Ingrid picked up the phone. They brought Bristol in at 7:05. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. Ingrid picked up the phone. They brought Bristol in at 7:05. She came in the way she comes into every room, already talking, already halfway through explaining, with her purse still on her arm like she might need to leave in a hurry. I'm going to tell you what she said in order because the order is the whole thing. First she said, I'm family. I've been on this booking since day 1. Ingrid said, the agreement authorizes the agent of record. Then she said, the man on the phone said it was fine. Colby, he didn't tell me I couldn't. Ingrid wrote that down. Then she said, Marla knew. She was CC'd on everything. And Ingrid turned the screen and read out the timestamp on the portal notification, Wednesday, 4:52 p.m., automated post-change, and asked Bristol if she had any correspondence showing prior notice. Bristol said she'd have to look on her phone. She did not look on her phone. And then Ingrid asked the last question in exactly the same flat voice she'd used for all the others. Mrs. Ostrander, where did you obtain the date of birth you provided for the guest in 2054? Bristol said, off the list. Which list? The one Marla sent everybody. in June. Ingrid put Rev 4 in front of her, turned it around, and put one finger on it. This list gives that guest's date of birth as March 4th, 2008. Nobody said anything for what felt like a long time and was probably 4 seconds. Bristol said, "Then it was a typo." Here's what I did not do. I did not say she'd done it on purpose. I have never said that. Not that night. Not since. Not to read. Not to dot. I don't know. A 5 and an 8 are not next to each other on a keyboard. And I've thought about that more than is good for me, but I don't know, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I do. What I said when Ingrid looked at me was, I'm not making an allegation. I'm asking you to correct the record. Ingrid Halverson looked at me for a second over the top of her glasses. And I think, I could be wrong, I think she liked that. That, she said, I can do tonight. Here's what she did in the next 40 minutes. She restored the Rev 4 assignment on board. Junie Ostrander, stateroom 8618, third berth, sofa. She reissued the key card herself and printed it at the desk outside. She pulled the rollaway from 2054 and released the third berth, which meant Tatum and Sutton got their room back. And I want it noted that Tatum's actual reaction to that news was relief. She entered a manifest correction on Tatum Ostrander's date of birth, which she said had to be done regardless of anything else, because a ship carries a legal count of who is on board and how old they are, and that is not a family matter. And she opened an incident report. Number, date, both parties, 3 attachments. Then she said the sentence that meant this wasn't over. Because the alteration was made to a group rooming list without agent authorization, and because it involved a minor's stated age, this goes to group sales compliance shoreside, not to me. They will review the file and issue a determination. Reed said, How long? 72 hours. I asked her one question, and I asked it because I already knew the answer and I wanted to hear an officer say it. Whose accreditation number is on the contract? Ingrid Halverson looked at me evenly. Yours. That's what nobody at table 212 understood, then or later. Compliance wasn't opening a file on Bristol. Compliance was opening a file on group G4471109. And there is exactly one licensed professional attached to that group, and it isn't the woman with the purse on her arm. It's the woman who has spent 11 years building a book of business out of church choirs and dental conventions and a mahjong club from Ashtabula. 3 days. That's what she gave me. 3 days on a ship with those people, waiting to find out whether the record was going to clear me or bury me with them. We got Junie at the ice cream place on deck 11 at 9:20. Denise had bought her 2 scoops and let her put sprinkles on both. I gave her the new key card. She read it. 8618. She said, Did you fix it? I said, The ship fixed it. She thought about that on the whole elevator ride, and then she said, Because it was against the rules? Because it was against the rules. Wyan had made up the sofa bed while we were on deck 5. Sheets, blanket, a chocolate on the pillow, and the little towel animal shaped like an elephant that they leave for kids. He'd angled the bed so the foot of it pointed at the balcony door. Junie put her backpack down. She walked over to the balcony door and she looked at the handle for a second, and then she worked the latch herself, both hands, and slid it open, and the warm air came in with all that black water noise underneath it. She stood there in her navy dress with the white piping and she said, You can hear it. At 11:50 that night, after she was asleep, an envelope came under the door. Meridian Star letterhead. Case G4471109B. Referred to Group Sales Compliance, Miami. Determination expected within 72 hours. Please remain available to the hotel director's office. And under that, one more line, printed in the same small type as everything else, that I read about 9 times standing in the dark in the bathroom so the light wouldn't wake my kid. Agent of record, M. Ostrander, accreditation on file. Vivian knocked on 8618 at 10 after 7 the next morning. Not a phone call, a knock. In 11 years, my mother-in-law has never knocked on a door of mine before 9 in the morning. And she stood in that hallway with her hair already done and said, "Buffet, 15 minutes, just the adults." Junie was still asleep on the sofa bed with her arm hanging off the side. I said, "I'll be there at 8. I made her wait 45 minutes. It's the only unkind thing I did all week, and I'd do it again. The buffet on the Coral Meridian is deck 11 aft, and at 8 in the morning on a sea day, it is 900 people and the smell of bacon. They'd taken a table by the windows. Vivian in the middle, Chet on her right, Bristol beside him in sunglasses on her head, indoors. Kimmer Vale 2 seats down with her plate already going. Reed came with me. That mattered more than I can explain in a way that doesn't sound small. Chet started before I had my chair pulled out. "You called the ship on your own niece," I said. "I reported a manifest error to an officer. You made a 17-year-old say her birthday out loud in front of 40 people." The cruise director asked her. She answered honestly, "That's the only reason any of this got fixed." Bristol said, without taking the sunglasses off her head, "Do you know they've got a report open on me? An incident report that's going to follow me." And I said, "And I've been asked about this since, and this is what I said, word for word. I know. It's got my accreditation number on it too." She didn't hear it. She wasn't listening for it. That whole week, not one of them ever once heard that part. Then Chet leaned back and did the thing he'd clearly been saving. "You want to be careful, Marla, because I'd hate for your boss to hear that one of her agents is using her position against her own family." He'd been rehearsing that. He had the cadence of a man who'd said it in the mirror. Vivian let it sit for a second, and then she did what she always does, which is come in behind the threat sounding like the peacemaker. "Nobody's calling anybody," she said. "We're a family. But Marla, honey." Junie was fine. She wasn't. She was fine. Vivian folded her napkin into a triangle. She was going to be in the pool all day and asleep at 10. You needed her not to be fine. It's the most efficient, cruel thing anyone has ever said to me. It takes a mother noticing her child being demoted and turns it into a mother needing her child to be hurt. I said, "She picked her bed 14 months ago. She colored it in with a marker. And my mother-in-law said, 'You keep score. That's what you've always done. You keep the books on this family.' Which is close enough to true that it took the wind out of me for a second. I do keep the books. Somebody had to. There's $4,050 of proof of that sitting on my agency's card." Then she said the last one. "You were never going to be one of us, Marla. You were the one who made the arrangements. 11 years. A brass anchor on my collar in a kitchen on Cascade Street. And that at a buffet table in front of her sons at 8 in the morning. I didn't cry and I didn't answer her. Dot Farkas taught me a long time ago that when somebody hands you a sentence like that, anything you say back becomes the story and the sentence disappears. So I let it stand there and be exactly what it was." Reed answered her. My husband, who has never once in 20 years won an argument in that family, put both hands flat on that buffet table and said, "Ma, if you say one more word about my wife, we're getting off in St. Thomas and flying home, and you can explain the empty chairs in the picture." Vivian looked at him like the salt shaker had spoken. Denise came over about a minute later with a coffee and sat down beside me without being invited on my side of the table, which in that family is a declaration of war conducted at the volume of a church whisper. She said, to nobody in particular, "I paid Marla back in cash, in an envelope, the first week." Chet said, "Nobody's talking about money." "I know," Denise said. "That's what I'm saying." Tatum came to 8618 at 2 o'clock that afternoon. She stood in the doorway with her phone in her hand and her thumbnail in her teeth and said, "Aunt Marla, can I show you something?" It was the family group chat. The Tuesday 9 days before we sailed, 10:31 in the morning, 17 minutes after the call to the group desk. Bristol. Fixed it. Kimmer, plus Dean are in 8624. Junie can bunk with the girls. She won't even notice Vivian. Perfect. 3 replies down, a thumbs up from Chet. Nobody had said no. Nobody had said, wait, does Marla know? Nobody had said, isn't Junie 9? 4 adults saw that message on a Tuesday morning, and one of them typed the word perfect. Tatum said, I can send it to you. And I said, no. I want to be honest about how long I thought about it first, because it was longer than I'm proud of. I stood there in that cabin with the balcony door open, and I thought about what that screenshot would do in Ingrid Halverson's little room on deck 5. Then I looked at a 17-year-old who was about to hand me her mother. I said, don't send it to me, honey. If anybody from the ship asks you a question, you tell them the truth. That's all you owe anybody in this, including your mom. She left. I sat down on the end of the sofa bed and put my hands over my face, because saying the right thing out loud does not always feel like winning. I found out later she went down to guest services by herself the next morning and asked for the officer with the silver hair. I called Dot Farkas from the ship at $7.99 a minute. I did it because of what Chet said at the buffet, and because I have learned one thing in 11 years of this job. The only version of bad news you survive is the one you deliver yourself. Dot picked up on the second ring. I said, Dot, before anybody else calls you, and she said, he already did. Monday morning, 9:15, Erie time. Chet Ostrander called Halyard Travel from a boat in the Atlantic Ocean at whatever it costs, and asked to speak to the owner, and told my boss of 11 years that one of her agents was using her professional position against her own family. What did you say? I asked him to spell his last name, Dot said, so I could put it in the file. I laughed. It came out sideways, and about half of it was not a laugh. Then she got businesslike, which is her way of being kind. Listen to me. Compliance is going to want an agent statement, in writing. Don't wait for them to ask, and don't write it angry. Facts, dates, document references, no adjectives. You submit that before they request it, and you are the professional in this file. You wait, and you're a party to a dispute. I wrote it that night in the business center on deck 5, at 79 cents a minute from 9:40 until almost 1 in the morning. 940 words. No adjectives. Rev 4, submitted June 11th with confirmation reference. Revision 7 keyed Tuesday 10:14. AM, inbound call, agent of record not party to the change. Section 9 of the group sales agreement. Deposit of $4,050 posted 14 months prior on the agency card. Deposit on stateroom 2054 drawn against group amenity credit. Occupancy standard published. Service note entered by a stateroom attendant on deck 2 at 12:52. Manifest correction entered by the guest services manager, night 1. And one paragraph at the end that Dot told me later was the whole thing. I am not requesting a penalty against any guest on this booking. I am requesting that the rooming list of record be restored to Rev 4, and that the group file reflect who submitted each revision. I printed 2 copies. I sent one to Yvette Salas and one to the compliance address on the letterhead, and I timestamped both. Tuesday was St. Thomas. I'd booked the family catamaran myself, 18 people, snorkel stop at Turtle Cove, rum punch for the adults. Every one of them went. We didn't. Reed and Junie and I took a taxi over the hill to Cokie Point, $12, and rented 2 masts for $8, and my daughter saw a sea turtle in 4 feet of water at 9:40 in the morning. She came up out of the water with the mask pushed onto her forehead and her eyes enormous, and she screamed, "Mom!" It looked at me. If the rest of this had never happened, if compliance had come back and taken my card, that 40 seconds would still have been worth the whole trip. We came back to the pier at 2. Dale was sitting on a bench in the shade by the terminal shops with his concentrator between his feet and a bag from the liquor store he wasn't supposed to have. My father-in-law is 71. He has said maybe 400 words to me in 11 years, and about 300 of them were about the Browns. He said, "Sit down a minute." Junie went to look at the t-shirts with Reed. Dale watched her go, and then he said, Viv's mother sold ferry tickets at Ashtabula. 22 years, that window. I know. The pin. The pin. He nodded slowly, a couple of times. You know what that woman used to say? Every night at supper? Everybody on the boat is on the boat. He looked out at the water for a while. She'd have somebody with no money, and she'd sell him the ticket anyway and eat it out of her own pay. Viv used to tell that story like it was scripture. Then he said, she's forgot it. I didn't say anything. I sat there Sunday night, he said, and watched that woman hand a key to a 9-year-old across a dinner table, and I ate my roll. He turned and looked at me directly for maybe the second time in our entire acquaintance. I told the officer, the lady with the short hair, yesterday morning, told her exactly what I saw and exactly what Viv said, and I signed the paper she gave me. I said, Dale, you didn't have to do that. And he said, I should have done it in September. At 4:40 that afternoon, Ingrid Halverson found me on deck 9 by the small pool, where Junie was doing the thing where she jumps in, gets out, and jumps in again, forever. She sat down on the edge of the lounger next to mine, which for a woman with 4 stripes on her shoulder is practically an embrace. Compliance has 2 more questions for you, she said. My stomach went over. That's the honest version. 3 days of holding it together and 1 sentence from an officer put my heart in my throat because there are only 2 reasons Miami asks the agent of record additional questions. And one of them is very bad. Ask, did you at any point after the 9th of the month submit, request, or authorize any revision to the rooming list for Group G 44771109? No, not one. Did you receive or do you expect to receive any commission, credit, or benefit as a result of Revision 7? I said, Revision 7 cost me a tour conductor credit and $400 of amenity money and put my kid on a rollaway. No. She wrote both answers down longhand and read them back to me, and I said yes to both. And she stood up. I said, is it me? Is that what this is? Ingrid Halverson looked down at me for a second, and then she said the least reassuring thing I've ever heard. Compliance reviews the file, not the people. Dinner that night was the split. Nobody announced it. Nobody moved anybody. It's just that at 6 o'clock, when the doors opened on deck 4, Denise and Grady and Wren went to table 212 with us. And Dale came with his little green tank and sat down next to Junie and asked her to explain the ice cream machine to him. Vivian and Chet and Bristol and Kimmer and Dean took the other 12 top. 2 tables, 1 family, 6 feet of carpet. Junie asked Dale if he wanted to see something, and she went and got her backpack from the chair. And out of the front pocket came a square of paper folded into 8s, soft at the creases, green marker showing through the folds. She spread the deck plan out on the tablecloth between the bread plates and showed her grandfather every cabin and who was in it and where she'd written her own name. Dale put his reading glasses on and looked at it for a long time. He said, "You spelled Colton with a K." She said, "I know, I was 8. I went to sleep that night at 11 with the balcony door cracked open. At 6:05 the next morning, I heard paper on carpet. I got up in the dark and picked the envelope up off the floor by the door, and I took it into the bathroom and shut the door and turned the light on and sat down on the edge of the tub with it in my lap. Meridian Star Cruises. Group Sales Compliance, Miami. Case G-4471109-B. And the subject line, in bold, the first thing your eye hits. Determination. Agent of record review? My name, not hers. 3 days after I stood up at that dinner table, I sat on the edge of a bathtub on deck 8 and read 4 pages. I'm going to give them to you in the order they came, because I read them in that order, sitting on cold fiberglass in the dark at 6 in the morning, with my hand shaking enough that I had to put the paper on my knee. Finding one. Revision 7 of the rooming list for Group G 44771109 was keyed on the basis of a telephone request from a party who is not the agent of record, in contravention of Section 9 of the group sales agreement. The rooming list of record is restored to Revision 4. Restored to Revision 4, 4 words, and 14 months and 9 cabins and a green marker all came back into alignment. Finding 2. Agent of record, no adverse finding. File notated, agent not party to Revision 7. Agent statement received and accepted. Accreditation remains in good standing. I read that one about 6 times. I've been carrying it since Sunday night. Not the cabin, the card. 11 years of building a book of business. And it had been sitting on a manifest I didn't write. I put my hand over my mouth so I wouldn't wake my kid. Finding 3. Guest B. Ostrander. Group booking privileges suspended for 24 months across the brand. Guest profile notated regarding a discrepancy in a stated guest date of birth. That's it. That's all it said. No accusation, no finding of intent, nothing about a 5 and an 8. Compliance did exactly what I'd asked Ingrid Halverson for on night 1, which was not to punish anybody, but to make the file say who did what. Finding 4 was the money, and this is where it stopped being about a bed. The 2 guests added to stateroom 862 for 9 days out had been given the group rate. They weren't entitled to it. A block closes, and after it closes, the fare is the fare. The correction posted the difference to their folio. $750 a person, $1,500, plus $612, which was the deposit on stateroom 2054, reversed off the group's amenity credit and put where it belonged, plus $400 in onboard credit that had already been spent on a folio that wasn't mine. $2,512 posted to Kimmer and Dean Vale on day 4 of a 7-night cruise. And then the last line on the last page. Tour conductor credit, reverted to agent of record pending reassignment. I need to explain that one, because it's the whole ending. When you fill 8 staterooms, the cruise line gives you a free berth. It's yours. It belongs to the agent whose work put those 8 cabins on the boat. 14 months earlier, from my desk on Peach Street, I had assigned mine to Vivian Ostrander. My mother-in-law sailed free. She has sailed free on my credit, in one form or another, on 4 different trips since 2019. She has never once known that, because I never told her, because telling somebody is the same as billing them. Compliance reverses everything attached to a disputed block. Automatic. Nobody decides it. And when the credit reverted, Vivian's fare posted to her folio at group rate. $899. Stateroom 862. Oh, the same number as the cabins in the title of this whole miserable week. They came to me at 2 in the afternoon on deck 5, by the atrium, where there's a piano nobody was playing and a coffee bar, and those long windows down the port side. Vivian first. Chet behind her, holding the folio printout, which tells you everything about which one of them was actually upset. In 11 years, my mother-in-law had never come to me. Not once. I went to her house, I called her, I brought the pie. She stood there in her cardigan with her mother's brass anchor on the collar, and she said, "They've put $900 on my room." I said, "I know." Chet says you can fix it. Chet said, "There's a form. The credit's yours. You sign it over, it goes back on her." He was right. Ingrid had given it to me at 9 that morning, at the desk, without comment, the way she'd done everything all week. 1 page. Agent reassignment of tour conductor credit. My accreditation number in the top box, already printed. 1 line for a berth number and 1 line for a signature. It was folded in my back pocket. I took it out and unfolded it and held it so Vivian could see what it was. "This is it," I said. "This puts your fare back." And she put her hand out. I said, "I'm not going to sign it. You have to understand, I had rehearsed nothing. I'd been up since 6. What came out of me came out flat and quiet. And it is still, 3 years later, the most honest thing I have ever said to that woman. It isn't the money, Vivian. It was never $900. I'd have written you a check for $900 any day of the last 11 years, and you know it," she said. "Then why?" Because for 11 years, the arrangements were how I paid rent in this family. That's what I had. Other people had money or a name or being born into it. And I can get you a balcony for $8.99. That was my chair at the table. That's why I was standing at the counter in your kitchen, and I was still glad to be there. I folded the form back up. And you told me at a buffet on Monday morning that I was never going to be one of you, that I was the one who made the arrangements. I put it in my pocket. Okay, then I'm done making them. Chet started to say something about family, and I looked at him, and for once in my life, I didn't hear a word of it. Vivian stood there a second, and then she did something with her hand at her collar and unpinned the anchor and held it out to me on her open palm. I looked at it a long time. 14 months in a zip pocket. 22 years at a ferry window in Ashtabula. I didn't take it. I said, give it to Junie, not through me. You walk down to deck 4 and you find her, and you put it on her yourself, and you tell her what your mother used to say about who's on the boat. She didn't do it that day. She did it Saturday morning at the gangway in Port Canaveral, with everybody standing around their luggage in that awful fluorescent light, waiting for their color group to be called. She got down about halfway to her knees, which at 68 with her hip is not nothing, and she pinned her mother's anchor onto the strap of a 9-year-old's backpack. And she said, everybody on the boat is on the boat. That's all. She didn't say it to me. She never apologized to me. Not that morning, not at Christmas, not since. I stopped needing her to on about the 5th day. Here's the rest of it, quick. The way you'd tell it to somebody at your kitchen table. Chet's phone call to my boss went into the file. Dot Farkas wrote it up the day he made it, dated and initialed, because Dot has been doing this since 1987, and she does not care who anybody's brother is. Kimmer and Dean paid the $2,512. They disputed it, and they lost, because there is a document. Bristol did not speak to me for 14 months. When she finally did, at Dale's funeral, she said, I never meant for it to go on a report. Which is, if you turn it around in the light, almost a true sentence. Tatum called me in October of that year, on her own, to ask how you become a travel agent. She's 21 now. She's got her own card. Denise and I talk every week. Dale died the following spring. At the reception, his sister told me he'd told the story of that pier bench in St. Thomas to everybody at the VFW who would sit still for it, and that the way he told it, the part he was proudest of, was signing the paper. We didn't go to Cascade Street that Thanksgiving. We hosted. Reed drove to the restaurant Supply Place on West 12th and bought 4 folding chairs for $11 each and set them all up before anybody arrived, so that no matter who came, nobody would have to stand at the counter. 9 people came, nobody stood. I left Halyard in February, not badly. Dot helped me do the paperwork, and my first 3 referrals came from her, including the Mahjong Club from Ashtabula, who followed me and did not even ask what it was about. Bissett is my maiden name. It's on the door now, and on the accreditation card in my wallet, and in the top box of every rooming list I submit. I still do groups. It's what I'm good at. Church choirs, class reunions, a bowling league out of Girard that sails every February. I do one thing differently, and it isn't a policy, it's just mine. Before I submit a list, I read it bottom to top instead of top to bottom, because the top of a rooming list is always the people who paid the most and complained the loudest, and the bottom of a rooming list is always the kids. And the kids are the ones who get moved. Junie's 11 now. She kept the key card from 8618, the second one, the one Ingrid printed at the desk at 9 o'clock on night 1. It's in a shoebox in her closet with a ticket stub and a sea turtle keychain from Cokie Point. The anchor lives on her backpack. She's on her 3rd backpack. She moves it over. And last month, I booked us a cabin. Not a block. Not 9 staterooms and a deposit on somebody else's behalf, and 14 months of holding a rate for people who'd call me the one who makes the arrangements. 1 cabin. 3 names. Reed Ostrander, Marla Ostrander, Junie Ostrander. Balcony, Aft, because we like the noise the water makes back there. I printed the deck plan at the office and brought it home and put it on the kitchen table with the good green marker beside it. The way you'd set a place for somebody. She's too old for it now. She colored it anyway. Took her about 40 minutes, and she got the pool deck blue and deck 8 green, same as when she was 8, and she wrote our 3 names in the little rectangle. Then she drew a stick figure with brown hair over by the balcony door and printed the same 3 words she printed the first time. Junie, window side. I didn't fold that one into 8ths and put it in the zip pocket of my work tote. I put it on the refrigerator at eye level where anybody who walks into my kitchen can see exactly whose name is on the room. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.